CJ Baker. This is the ongoing history of protest music. So today I did do something a little bit different, or at least different for me, because I think there's a number of these types of videos on YouTube. I decided on Rate Your Music, you can create different charts based on different criteria, such as years, decade, but you can also create charts based on descriptors. So since there is no protest genre, I decided to type in the word protest and then check out basically the best protest albums of all time. So these are going to scroll through the 100 best albums that includes protest in the descriptors. So this is a note. I was also considering doing this for the current year, 2024, because I posted the best protest albums so far on my website, Ongoing History of Protest Songs. But when I did that, it only listed 24 albums that included protest as a description. That being said, I only listened to 2 of those albums, so it was good for giving me suggestions of some other albums that I'm going to have to listen to. So like I said, I'm going to scroll through the top 100. I'm going to offer some observations. So this is a note. This is my first time looking at it. So of course, there's going to be some albums that I've never listened to, and there's probably going to be some artists and albums that I've never heard of. So to begin with, we got number 100, Red Bee and Blood by Poets and the Roots. So this is actually an excellent album. It's a project of Jamaican dub poet Linton Krause Johnson. So this is probably Johnson's strongest album that he's connected with. It'd be interesting to see if he has any other albums on the list. Album 99, I'm not going to try to pronounce the album's name, but it's by Kino. So I don't know too much about Kino, but I know that they're all Russian, and I believe they're considered one of the most important, influential Russian rock bands of all time. And I also know that the lead singer died at a pretty young age, I believe, about 26 or 28. I know he wasn't 27. He's not in the 27 club. But from what I believe, the band was considered pretty controversial because a lot of their lyrics were somewhat anti-government. And that was definitely an issue during Soviet times because the Soviet Union still existed at this period. But yeah, Kino, they're definitely considered to be an important band, even though I'm not particularly familiar with them. 98 is Liberation Music Orchestra by Charlie Hayden. So this is experimental big band. I'm going to be honest, even though I heard the name, I never actually listened to that album. And then 97, I'm sure this is going to be the first of many albums by Fela Kuti, because he's basically one of the most important protest artists of all time. And I'm going to be honest, I listened to a lot of Fela stuff, but I never actually specifically listened to this album, Shuffling and Smiling. Hopefully I pronounced that right there because the spelling's a bit different. Then 96, we got Jita by, I'm probably going to mess up the name there, so I probably won't say it. And it's a name I'm not familiar with, but it is listed as MPB, which is basically Brazilian music. Like I think M's music, B's popular, and then B's Brazil. So it's basically Brazilian popular music. And I do like a lot of the MPB stuff I've listened to. So this is definitely something I'm going to check out. And it's listed as 1974. I'm currently doing a 1974 deep dive as part of a music community I'm part of. So that's definitely an album I'm going to have to listen to. So next we got 95 by The Coup, Steal This Album. So this is Boot Riley's project. And I enjoy The Coup, and they have a lot of albums I really like, and this is an excellent album. And then 94 is, it looks like this is an artist from Chile. I think that's what it's listed as, I believe. I'm not overly familiar with this artist, but Pera, if I'm pronouncing that right. And I've never listened to the album, so that might be worth checking out. So next we got Brass by Moore and Billy Woods. I believe this was included on my list of best protest albums of 2020, like every year since 2017. At the end of the year, I do a list of the 40 best protest albums. And I'm a fan of both Moore, who's a spoken word jazz poet, and Billy Woods, who's one of the best experimental underground rappers. So yeah, that's definitely an album worth checking out if you haven't yet. Then we got another album by Kino. Then we got 91 is Africa Must Be Free by 1983 by Hu Mundell. So I'm going to be honest, I haven't listened to that album. So it's definitely one for me to check out. Number 90, Inflammable Material by Stiff Little Fingers. And this is an excellent album. I know it includes Suspect Devices, which is a fantastic song. I believe they are Irish, but I'm not 100% sure. But yeah, definitely great political punk rock music. 89 is I'm assuming, the first of multiple albums by Victor Jala. So he's from Chile and he's a very important singer songwriter and activist. So no surprise to see him on this list. And then we got an 86 album. I'm not going to try to pronounce that. It looks like it has something to do with the Soviet Union. And it's listed as post-punk and art punk. So that might be something worth checking out. 87, not familiar with, but it is listed as MPB, which I am a fan of that genre. So that's worth checking out. 86, Babylon by Gus, Volume 1 by Black Allen. It's listed as conscious hip hop, boom bap, and reggae. So once again, I'm not familiar with that album, but it'd be one worth checking out. 985, this is not my really like. The Raspa Problems by Soul Globe. So they're a fantastic hardcore punk band. And this album was on my list of best protest albums of 2022. So an excellent album that's worth checking out. It does address a lot of issues in terms of systemic racism, and it definitely has the right amount of righteous indignation. So the next album, Nasm, not really familiar with. It's listed as grindcore and metalcore. That might be worth checking out. I didn't include it in my list of metal albums and songs just because I wasn't familiar with it. 83, I do like this album. 27's Clash by Culture, a great socially conscious reggae album. And of course, reggae is a genre that is closely linked to protest music, especially in the 70s. That was a peak period for that. 82, this is definitely an influential album. Hear Nothing, See Nothing, Say Nothing by Discharge. And I talked about this album in a video I posted recently about the 10 best protest metal bands of all time, and not band albums, but both the band Discharge and this album was influential in developing many genre and subgenres of both punk and metal. So definitely an important foundational album there. 81, Coffin for Head of State by Fela Kuti and the Africa 770. So I listened to this album, excellent album. And of course, you're going to have several Fela Kuti albums on this list. So it looks like we already have two. And I'm suspecting there's going to be a few more on this list. So number 80, I'm going to be honest, never heard of it. 79, this is an excellent album. the RTJ4 by One the Jewels. It was one of my top protest albums of 2020. So basically, even though it was a list of 40 albums, this would basically probably be my number two album, maybe number one. But it was basically this album and Fetch the Bolt Cutters by Fiona Apple, which I could see possibly being on this list. It just depends on if they included the protest descriptor for it. But yeah, great socially conscious album. I mean, basically all the Wonder Jewel albums all, but this is probably my favorite Wonder Jewels album. And it was very timely because it dealt a lot with situations that were going on in that time period. So it lent itself well with some of the well publicized instances of police brutality and Black Lives Matters protests. It definitely captured the mood that was going on at that time period. And it is my favorite One, the Jewels album. But it'd be interesting to see if any of the other three albums made the top 100 here. 78, I'm, to be honest, not familiar with, but I do like NPB, so it might be worth listening to. 77, a classic album, Burning by the Wailers. So I believe that's the first Wailers album that appeared here, but I'm also assuming it probably won't be the last. It's probably going to be other Bob Marley and the Wailers albums on this list here. 76. I'm not going to try to pronounce that. And I'm not familiar with that album, so it might be worth checking out. Same as 75. It's listed as conscious hip hop and Latin rap. Not really a genre like Latin rap, I'm not overly familiar with. Number 74. This is an excellent album, Joy as an Act of Resistance by Idols. So this was one of my favorite protest albums of 2018. A very good socially conscious album. 73. We got We Buy Diabetic Test Strips by Armand Hammer. I actually really enjoyed this album, but I'm going to be honest, it did not make my list of best protest albums of 2023 just because I didn't immediately link it to being protest, but it's definitely listed here as protest, and it's also listed as political hip hop. And I guess the We Buy Diabetic Test Strips that could be considered a commentary on healthcare, I'm assuming. I guess I just need to explore the album a bit more to kind of make that the social commentary aspect of the album stand out a bit more. And then we have looks like the 73 album is going to be an album I'm not familiar with. Let's scroll down here. Yeah, Silvio Rodriguez. So I'm going to be honest, not familiar with it. Same with 71. So that's going to be an album to check out. Same with 70, but another NPB album. So there's a lot of socially conscious music from Brazil as being demonstrated on this list here. We got Death Certificate by Ice Cube. Yeah, I do like this album. It's a great political rap album. I would describe it as more political than direct protesting, but it does shed a light on different issues going on. And then 68, of course, this is probably not going to be it's the first Bob Dylan album on the list, but I'm suspecting probably not the last. Might be because this is probably the most political album Bob Dylan put out, but it's not necessarily as most critically well received. So if any of the other albums are listed as protest, there's a couple that potentially could still appear, but the times they all are changing, like right off the bat. The title track is a classic, and the album as a whole is basically filled with different protest songs. 67, not familiar with. 66, Rhythm Nation 1814 by Janet Jackson. So yeah, this is considered to be a protest album, and it's basically a concept album that looks into issues of unity, and I think a lot of that deals with even like racial unity. And it is interesting. I believe 1814 was the year that the Star Spangled Banner was written. I think so, but I don't know if that's an intentional connection there or not. But definitely a socially conscious album. And then we got the Water Boys. This is the Sea. I mean, I've heard of the Water Boys and listened to some of the stuff, but to be honest, it's not a band I'm overly familiar with. And I haven't specifically listened to this album, so I have to listen to it and see how it connects to the idea of being a protest album. So 64, not familiar with. 63, well, of course, you're going to have some Clash. And I'm assuming this is not going to be the last Clash album. I mean, right off the bat, I'm suspecting London Calling will be on there. But yeah, excellent the debut album. Very important socially conscious punk band. And when you think of socially conscious music, you think of The Clash and Joe Strummer. 62, not familiar with. 61, Let England Shake, PJ Harvey. I did make a list of the best 100 protest albums of the 2000s and 10s, and this album was included on that. So definitely it's an insightful analysis of basically politics in England, both past and present. So a very insightful album. Then we got Storm Clock by Roy Harper. And I've heard of the name Roy Harper, but I'm going to be honest, he's kind of flew below my radar. So he's not someone I've really listened to, and I definitely never heard this album. So 59, John Prine. So this is, of course, his debut album, and this is an excellent album. Definitely a personal favorite of mine. There's some great protest songs, like Sam Stone is one of the best anti-war Vietnam protest songs. There's also I'm trying to remember the exact name of it now, but it's like your flag the cow won't get you into heaven. But that's a brilliant satire. Paradise touches upon environmental issues. So definitely an excellent album there. Once again, Fela Kuti. So I believe this is like the third Fela Kuti album. And respected, maybe not the last. I think at the very least, Zombie's probably going to be on there. A very important Afrobeat album. 57, excellent socially conscious rap album by Diggable Planets. And this is a really good album. Their 1994 album was also excellent, great socially conscious band. I wouldn't describe them as explicitly political, but there's definitely social commentary there. 56, Fugazi, and on the Caretaker. So yeah, obviously they're a political punk band. That's also Ian MacKaye was very much, he protests not just with his music, but even with his ideals. Like he had like an anti-materialistic, anti-commercial approach to his music, and even towards merchandising and other aspects of the music business. Then we got 55, Goody Mob, Soul Food. I'm gonna be honest, I actually haven't listened to that album. Is this the band rap group that CeeLo's a part of? They have flew beneath my radar a bit. That's something for me to explore. Then we'll have 54. So yeah, so another Fela Kuti album, Confusion. This was in 74. So I recently listened to this as part of a 1974 deep dive I'm doing. So an excellent socially conscious Afrobeat album. 53, Cold Fact by Rodriguez. Yeah, I love this album. Um, Even if you're not overly familiar with the name Rodriguez, you may have heard of the documentary Searching for Sugarman. I believe it won the Oscar for Best Documentary. Also on my website, because he passed away recently, I posted 5 protest songs that he recorded. But yeah, Cold Facts is it's an excellent album. Definitely recommend it. And we'll have 52. I'm gonna butcher the pronunciation, so I'm not gonna say it. But this is a 1974 album. I listened to it recently as part of the 74 deep dive. I didn't because it's in another language. I didn't really pick up on the political aspect, so that might be something I have to do a bit more research on. And if I actually took time to translate the lyrics into English, maybe it would resonate more than what it did because it is a bit too proggy for my taste. So I kind of liked it, but I didn't really connect to it. But approaching the perspective of being a socially conscious album and being able to understand it in the context of being a political statement, that might affect the way I approach the album and listen to it. The next one is Dystopia. This is sludge metal and crust punk. I'm gonna be honest, not familiar with it, which is why I did not include it on my list of heavy metal protest albums. But it looks like it's an album I'll need to check out. Number 50, DJ Sprinkles, never heard of. So I haven't listened to this album. So another album I may have to check out. 49, Meat is Murder by The Smiths. Excellent album. I'm not sure if this will be the only Smiths album or not. I mean, The Queen is Dead, if it's listed as protest, that being included. But this is probably the Smiths' most explicitly political album. And obviously, Morrissey is an animal rights activist. So obviously or actually not some, a lot of Morrissey's politics are a bit sketchy, but this album, it's a good album, and I'm not against animal rights activism. So 48, this is actually an awesome album, but I don't really want to butcher the title, but it's a Tropicala album, but basically it's Brazilian, and that's a socially conscious music genre in Brazil. And I know it translates loosely into something about bread and circus. So an excellent compilation of I think the really cool psychedelic rock album, and if you took time to look up the context and translate some of the lyrics into English, it's definitely a socially conscious album. So 71, another Victor Jaw album, like the third, but I suspect there to be a few of them, and it might be more. I don't know enough about Victor Jara to know what's considered to be his definitive album, but I know he's considered to be a very important artist. Then we got 46, Gray Area by Little Sims. To be honest, I've never listened to that. I'm not familiar with them. 45, classic album. I'm actually surprised it's only 45. I thought it would be even a bit higher on this list, but I'm suspecting It Takes a Nation of Millions will probably be somewhere on the top 10, maybe top 5. But yeah, Public Enemy can make an argument that they're the most important political hip hop band of all time. And that's an excellent hard-hitting album. So we got 44. Yeah, I love this album, The Arch Android by Janelle Monáe. So it's an interesting concept album that does address certain socio-political issues. So it's definitely my favorite album that Janelle Monáe as released. So 43, to be honest, not familiar with. 42, I mentioned this before, how this was my favorite album, actually favorite album period, but my favorite political protest album of 2020. So that along with Run the Jewels 4 or TJ 4. So yeah, I think part of the reason why this album resonated was because it was the perfect album for COVID. So people kind of almost felt trapped in the circumstances, and you want to use those friggin' bolt cutters to escape. And it's also an album about resilience and defiance. And so even though it may not be explicitly political, it definitely addresses social issues and definitely in an insightful, thoughtful way. 41, I believe this is considered one of the first political jazz albums. There probably was some predate that, like Thelonious Monk, I think had some in the 50s that were considered protest music. Yeah, We Insist, Max Roach's Freedom Now Suite. That's an excellent jazz album. So if you're, and jazz is definitely, especially that time period of jazz, was definitely a political era and is closely connected to the canon, or say it's included in the canon of protest music. So we'll now look at the last 40. So what's number 40? Yeah, not familiar with. Might be another album to listen to. It is listed as avant-garde jazz. It also said poetry, so maybe there's some spoken word jazz poetry. But then, like we said, that's definitely a genre associated with protest music. So 39, excellent album. The Shape of Punk to Come by Refuse. I actually heard recently that the lead singer had a heart attack, so hopefully he'll be okay. But yeah, this is a fantastic album. New Noise, which is not necessarily the most political song on the album, but that song is definitely a banger. So we got 38, Catch a Fire by the Wailers. So this was actually released the same year of Burning, which was also on the list. I believe this is only the second Wailers album, but this might be the most well received. So this might be the last Wailers album. I could see possibly Exodus making the list. We got 37, Stakes is High by De La Soul. I wonder if because I believe it's like the third album. Yeah, I think the first two were more well received. So if the first two albums have the protest descriptor, I could see them possibly being on there. 36. To be honest, I'm not familiar with this album, so something I'll have to listen to. Okay, we had a Diggable Planets album earlier, the 93 album. This album, I'd say, is even stronger, Blowout Comb. So a great socially conscious album. That's worth checking out. Okay, we got another Bob Dylan album, Desire, Bob Dylan. I'm actually a little bit surprised to see this because this was kind of a time period where he started to drift away from protest music. But if I remember right, I think Desire did include Hurricane, which is a powerful protest song about the wrongful conviction of Hurricane Reuben Carter. And it also addresses systemic racism. I'm trying to remember what else was on that album. I know I've listed it in the past, but it's been a while. So Stand by Sly and the Family Stone. I think this might be the only Sly and the Family Stone album I've seen. which surprises me a little bit, but I guess there still could be another one. But yeah, an excellent socially aware album. Another Fela Kuti album, Sorrow, Tears, and Blood. I haven't seen Zombie yet, so I'm wondering if that'll be on the list. Okay, I'm not familiar with this album, so it's definitely something to check out. But that's actually the great thing, because I don't want to get too uptight about the validity of these types of lists. But I think the interesting things about checking out these lists is it could expose you to types of music that you wouldn't listen to otherwise, especially music from other countries. So it's definitely a good exercise that way. So Fugazi Repeater, excellent album. We already mentioned how Fugazi is a very important DIY punk band. They're also very important in the straight edge movement. Silvio Rodriguez. Haven't we listened to any of the music? I believe they had one other album on this list. Okay, 28, excellent album. I made a video of my top 10 1984 protest album, and this made the list. It might be my number one protest album. Probably. I also made as part of like a deep dive I did as part of my music community, made a list of my top 25 albums. I'm trying to remember where did it finish. Number one was Purple Rain. Number two was The Smiths. Number three was Minutemen. Number three, I think it was number three. Replacements four, and Let's Go Do five. But those were my five albums that I gave 5 stars to. But most of the songs on there could be considered protest tunes. A lot of it dealt with different social economic issues. It examined U.S. foreign policy, and there was a couple of like really good anti-war tunes. Another Fugazi album, The Argument. So yeah, Fugazi you can't really argue with. Okay, another. This is the one that I thought might be on the list. There's a riot going on by Sly and the Family Stone. So this is probably the most political album that they put out. 25. I'm actually surprised that this was the first Gil Scott on because I thought that like Winter in America, I thought maybe, and there was a couple of other albums that I potentially could see making the list. But yeah, you gotta have Gil Scott on, an influential Puerto rapper. And this album includes The Revolution Will Not Be Televised, but the album as a whole, an important socially conscious album. Another Fela Kuti. I still haven't seen Zombie, which surprises me, but maybe it'll still be on the list. 23, Steconia by Outkast. I mean, I like this album. I like Outkast, but I don't automatically associate it with being a protest album. But once again, it might mean that I have to re-listen to it. I'm not entirely sure who comes up with the descriptors, just like I'm not sure if it's possible for users to go in and add descriptors or suggest them. Because if anyone's watching this video and you know the process involved with the descriptors, feel free to leave a comment. 22, Plastic Surgery Disasters by Dead Kennedys. I wonder if this will be the only Dead Kennedys, because this wouldn't be the first Dead Kennedys album that I would think of. I would think of like Fresh Fruit for Rotten Vegetables. I'd probably put that ahead of this one. But this is an excellent protest album. 21, okay, we do have a third, I think it's like the third Bob Dylan album, the Freewheelin' Bob Dylan. Yeah, and this has, multiple protest songs on it. So yeah, Bob Dylan, especially in the 60s, was basically the first name you think of when you think of protest music. So I'm not familiar with this. I think they've appeared also elsewhere on the list. So I'm gonna probably butcher the name, but Barcenas MCs sounds like it's something that's gonna be worth checking out. Okay, I'm actually surprised that it's only 19 because I mentioned earlier that I thought this could be like a top 5 protest album. But yeah, it takes a nation of millions to hold us back. It's one of the most important albums of all time. Definitely can't argue with that. 18, this heat, this seat. I have listened to it before, but it is an album I'm gonna have to delve a bit more into. Okay, this is yeah, I'm not surprised to see this. Black Messiah by D'Angelo and the Vanguard. And this was actually written, I believe it was time of Michael Brown's murder. I don't know, but it was basically heavily influenced by police brutality. And it's a powerful album. So 16, Offer or the Decline and Fall of the British Empire by the Kinks. Yeah, so this is just called like a rock opera or concept album. And it does, or you could view it as a commentary on British culture. 15, Charlie Garcia. I'm not overly familiar with Charlie Garcia. I've heard of the name, but it's something I'd have to explore further. 14, Entertainment, Gang of Four. This is an excellent album, but once again, it's not an album that I immediately associate with being a protest album. So I might have to re-listen to it in that context. 15, The Fire This Time, not familiar with it. Apparently it's a spoken word sound collage album. So yeah, it might be interesting to check out. Okay, there's Zombie. I have a feeling that this might be the last Fela Kuti album because I think this is widely considered his best album. And Zombie, the album and the song, but basically most of his albums are only 2 songs because the songs quite often are like 12, 13 minutes. But yeah, powerful album, powerful song. Kuti, as mentioned before, is one of the most influential, not only protest artists, he's one of the most influential artists of all time, period. So 11. Trying to remember, I think that name looks familiar because I think he had another album, but once again, not familiar. But it is another NPB album, and I do like that genre. And a lot of Brazilian music is political in nature. So number 10, okay, we got another Fela Kuti album. Yeah, I'm actually surprised to see that this did better than Zombie, but Expensive Shit is a excellent album. Okay, number 9, of course. I thought it might actually even be a little bit higher on the list, but can't argue with Rage Against the Machine. But yeah, the self-titled album, definitely a very important political album. I actually talked about this album on my list of 10 metal protest albums of all time. Number 8, this is actually an excellent album, Black on Both Sides by Mos Def. I made a list of the top 10 protest albums of the 90s, not top 10, top 100 protest albums of the 90s on my website, and disappeared on that list. That list was chronological, so I can't exactly tell you where it would rank numerically, but an excellent socially conscious album. Okay, Toxicity, System of a Down. I'm actually surprised that this did better on the list than Rage Against the Machine, but this is an excellent political album, which did appear. I did mention it in my list of top 10 heavy metal protest albums. So let's see, number 6. Okay, another Bob Dylan album, bringing it all back home. I guess not a huge surprise. as 1965. At this point, Bob Dylan was still considered a protest singer. Yeah, so we got number 5, of course, London Calling by The Clash. I mentioned it previous that all likelihood this album would appear on this list. One of the most important albums of all time, period. Number 4, once again, no surprise, What's Going On by Marvin Gaye. So this also, I believe, was number 1 on the Rolling Stone 500 list, which it's easy to kind of be critical of that list, but I don't think you could argue too much about this album being number 1. It's an album that resonates even more, and I think the socio-political climate is probably what influenced its placement on the Rolling Stone list, but it's definitely a very important socially conscious album, but obviously the title track is a very important socially conscious song as well. And there's others like Mercy Mercy Me was a very good song, like dealing with environmental issues, and like in the City Blues, like there's a lot of like political commentary on that album. Number 3, Animals by Pink Floyd. So I know it's based on, I think George Orwell, is it 84, 1984? I forget, but it does address political issues. I'm surprised to see it at number 3, but yeah, it is considered to be a classic album. Number 2, Paranoid by Black Sabbath. And I mentioned on my previous video about the top 10 heavy metal protest albums that just made that list, and it's definitely, I could say, one of the best protest albums of all time, and it does contain a number of songs that address different social issues. Like War Pigs is one of the best anti-war songs of all time, and Electric Funeral and Iron Man both address apocalyptic concerns about nuclear annihilation. So definitely a powerful, socially conscious album. And as mentioned previously in the videos that I recorded, heavy metal sometimes doesn't get enough credit for its social commentary. And number 1, I was kind of anticipating this, to Pimp a Butterfly by Kendrick Lamar. So I believe that this is number 1 overall on the Rate Your Music all-time charts. I think it's either this or OK Computer by Radiohead. And also OK Computer by Radiohead. I think you can actually make an argument that that's a protest album. It definitely addresses different concerns and anxieties that people face, and there's definite social commentary on it. But I guess no one used protest as a descriptor for it. But yeah, The Pimple Butterfly is definitely a landmark album, and there was a number of songs that definitely address social issues, and or even adopted, like We're Gonna Be All Right. It was used at different protest rallies, and The Black or the Berries, powerful protest songs, powerful protest song. It's only one song. So yeah, Pimp the Butterfly, you can't really argue with. So that basically concludes this list. So what do you think of the Rate Your Music 100 protest songs? Was there any albums that you were surprised to see? Any protest albums that you thought should make the list? Well, feel free to protest the list in the comments. Also, if you want me to continue making videos like these, like and subscribe, and feel free to check out my website, Ongoing History of Protest Songs.com. So thanks for watching, and please stay safe.